Mayor Marcy Tinsley, Royal Palm Beach Vice Mayor Jeff Amara, probably one of the coolest jobs of anybody is Ellen Andel, the council member from Juneau Beach. Great to meet you. And we also have the Executive Director of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council with us today, Michael Bushman. We really want to thank our vendors. They got up early this morning, got here very early and started setting up their tables, and I hope that each of you, if you haven't had a chance to go by and visit and understand better about what they provide to our community, that you'll do that when we're finished today, because what they do is also a big help in terms of mobility and transportation and just quality of life for the South Florida region. So we have the Palm Beach MPO, we have Palm Tran, South Florida Commuter Services, South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, Skybike, you can see some of their blue bikes out in the lobby there, the Free Ride, we have Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and Zipcar. I'm not sure if we had Uber, but we invited Uber. Before we jump into the program, I do want to recognize a few of the senior team members from WGI. We have David Wampman, our President and CEO. Mario Chavarria, our COO. Mario's here. You met Brian Lamont. Brian is our Vice President for Business Development. And just pause for a second about Brian. Brian also heads up the creative services group that really put all this together, all the graphics and all the visuals. And we have a really talented team of graphic designers, website designers, and marketing folks that make us look good, we think, every day at WGI. We have Jeff Brophy, he's the Vice President for Planning. And finally, Brian Terry, also Vice President for Planning at WGI. On your table, you'll see one of these little table tents, and it has hashtag WGI Density and Mobility. We're doing a live feed on Facebook. We're doing Twitter updates throughout the morning up until 10 o'clock, so check in, and if you are inclined, say good things about us, or if you're not, tell us what you think. But we're doing a live update. And perhaps the most important thing, other than the great panel and the mayor talking, is that if you hang in here with us till the end, we're going to give away 2 of these green bikes here. So if you haven't put your business card in the bulb out on the table out there, make sure you do that. So we're going to give away 2 bicycles at the end of the program today. Now, if I can get this. We're at the end of the slides. Javier, we need to go to the beginning of the slides. We'll get there. There we go. There we go. Now we got it. Thank you. So why density and mobility? Why did we pick this theme? This is the 5th annual networking breakfast, and why did we pick it? It is actually kind of related to something that's happening today. Does anybody know what today is, other than the fact that it's November the 30th? Anybody know what it is? It's the end of hurricane season, right? Yeah, the mayor, all the mayors, they know. It's the end of hurricane season. What starts tomorrow? Hurricane amnesia starts tomorrow. And so people are going to walk outside and they're going to say, hey, wow, it's 75 degrees on Thanksgiving Day in the blue skies in Palm Beach County, so we should go there. Maybe we should live there. And that's what's going to happen. We all get the amnesia. We forget about that occasional pesky storm. We got lucky this year with Matthew, but we forget about it, and people are coming. And Kim Delaney's going to talk a little bit more about that in our panel in a few minutes. But that's why we picked density and mobility, because it's joined to that. People are coming. And so how are we going to address it? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to live? Where are they going to work? Where are they going to play? Those are critical policy issues that our leadership in the counties and the cities have to address. There are critical policy and issues that those of us in the consultant community have to help the counties and cities and the developers think about. Tell you just a little bit, it's going to be very short. The only commercial about WGI, but we figured we'll take a little bit of a privilege here. And we are one of the largest consulting firms in Florida. We are Palm Beach County based. We have nearly 350 professionals, and we do engineering related to transportation and water projects. We do structural engineering, a lot of environmental work, big survey and mapping rig. I hope you get a chance to see some of our drones out there. These are serious. These aren't toys. These are serious drones, and we use them for business. We use them to help our clients. Underground utility services, landscape architecture is a huge practice at WGI, as well as planning, and I mentioned our creative services. We're located in 8 offices around the state. Out of those 350, nearly 200 of them are right here in Palm Beach County in our corporate headquarters just out Okeechobee Boulevard at Vista Parkway. So we're proud to be part of Florida's communities and do things that we think help Florida cities and counties and our clients. And we are a hot firm. We're going to brag just a little bit, but we are a hot firm. We're one of the fastest growing firms in not Florida, not Palm Beach County, but the nation. I think last year we were about the 5th. Perhaps more important to us, those of us that are helping lead WGI, is that we were also one of the top 20 best firms to work for in the United States last year. And I think that's good for Palm Beach County. We employ a lot of professionals that live, work, and play in Palm Beach County. We think that's good for our community. We're proud to be part of it. With that, I'm going to ask Brian Terry to come up and introduce our mayor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Terry, and I just want to welcome again everybody this morning. I was lucky enough to meet Mayor Moya as a young planner quite a while ago now, many years, and she was a commissioner. And I just have to say, it's been wonderful doing the work that we do within the community, being a resident within the county, and seeing the growth of the community under her leadership as a commissioner and now as the mayor since 2011. In her second term, leading the city forward, and as again, the economic resurgence of the city, and as we look to the future, I want to welcome Mayor Moya to give us an introduction.
Thank you, Brian. I told Brian just to say, here's Jerry, but I always get embarrassed with those long introductions, so I'm glad that this one was short. Thank you. I want to say good morning to all of you and welcome to this wonderful symposium. And it's really an honor and pleasure to be here with you today. I want to say a particular thank you to the Watman Group for having the insight and vision to hold such a symposium on a really important topic of density and mobility. Today, more and more people are living in cities. As a matter of fact, at this point, according to the United Nations, about 54% of us live in urban centers. And the projection is that about 67% of us by 2020 will be living in urban centers. It's at the city level where real change is occurring, and it's city government that most directly impacts the quality of life of the residents of the city. My fellow mayors and I are always facing challenges, and I have to say opportunities on an everyday basis. Over the past 5 years, West Palm Beach has seen a huge building boom, as all of you know. So many of you have participated in that. And there's been a special increase in building in our downtown area. More and more people are choosing to live in downtowns for a variety of reasons. Since 2011, which is when I became mayor, we have had approximately $412 million in new construction, and we are projecting at $2.4 billion through 2020. So we're growing and building. A significant portion of that building did occur in our downtown area, bringing us a lot of challenges and opportunities. In the 1970s, Jane Jacobs argued that we could minimize our damage to the environment by clustering together in high rises and walking to work. Wouldn't that be nice? So from millennials to baby boomers like myself, people are choosing to live in urban life, an urban lifestyle. And some of them have never lived an urban lifestyle, so they are dealing with the challenges and opportunities of living in a city. So one of those opportunities is how we're going to move people around and through our city. Notice I said not how we're going to move cars around, but how we're going to move people around. In Florida, our history has been to focus on cars. As a result, we have 8-lane highways, we have flyovers over flyovers over flyovers and overs, which I understand is the new proposal for Southern Boulevard at 95. We have ever-increasing network of roads, and we sort of forgotten about how we're going to get people around. A few years ago, I came across a book called Walkable Cities by Jeff Scott. And reading that book, actually Rick Gonzalez gave it to me, reading that book really opened my eyes to the future of cities and transportation in cities in general. He has laid forward 10 steps to walkability. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those 10 steps. The first one is, put cars in their place and put an end to auto-centric city planning. That's what we have to do. And I tell you, in West Palm Beach now, in our planning department, we're actually telling people they can build fewer parking spaces than the code requires. We had a study done a few years back that says West Palm Beach is overparked, yet we're building this monstrosity behind us for 2,700 cars. We shouldn't be talking about where we're going to park cars. We should be talking about what we're going to do with parking garages when they're obsolete, because we're going to have autonomous cars, and more people are going to be in cities than walking. He also said the mixed uses. Residents should be able to work, shop, eat, drink, learn, recreate, convene, and worship, and on and on and on in the same downtown. And that's what we're striving for in our downtown, trying to bring more culture with our arts and entertainment district. We've just launched the Flagler Financial District, attracting more financial businesses and making it a great place to live and to work. He also says, get the parking right. There should be less parking that costs twice as much. I can't tell you the number of times people come to me and ask me to have free parking on Clematis, which would probably be the worst thing we could do for Clematis Street. So it's a fight that we're constantly waging, actually talking about increasing parking costs because we want people to get out of their cars. We want people to walk, we want people to bike. Let transit work. Make public transit more convenient and comfortable. Well, we have the trolley, which moves us around the city, but the big problem that we have is how to get people into our city and out of our city. So we have been working with a group of people, including Nick Uren and others, on East-West Transit. Mary Lou Bedford from the Western Chamber, Central Chamber. We've been talking about what does mass transit look like on Okeechobee Corridor, on the Southern Corridor. We have to talk about East-West Transit. Are we going to do bus rapid transit? Are we going to do light rail? Those are ways we should talk about. We shouldn't be talking about widening Okeechobee Boulevard. We shouldn't be talking about building a bridge over Okeechobee Boulevard. We need to be talking about mass transit. How do we protect our pedestrians? They do that by shorter blocks, narrower traffic lanes, and two-way streets, which favor pedestrians. One of the biggest complaints I get, and I get on a daily basis, is of the traffic on Okeechobee Boulevard. What we need to do on Okeechobee Boulevard, and half of you will probably keel over when I say this, is we need to narrow the lanes. We need to be able to get the pedestrians across the street in a safe manner. We need to fix the lights. We need to have some more street lighting, but we don't need to widen it or do anything fancy. We have some really basic ideas for it. And we need mass transit. We need to welcome bikes. We have our Sky Bike people here. We're building bike lanes all the time. You'll soon see a greenway that will take you from the south part of the city all the way through the north part, a greenway bikeway. We need to shape our spaces and get the design right. Last year, 2015, I had the opportunity to go to Copenhagen with the Knight Foundation. Rafael Clemente was with me there. And one of the things I learned a couple of things in Copenhagen. One, a lot about bike lanes. Oh, guess what? They need to be connected to something. You can't just plop a bike lane on the street and it doesn't get you from point A or point B. And secondly, we learned that design is so important. Everything they do in Copenhagen is around design. It has a design competition. We need to keep the design interesting in our city. And you know, we have to be realistic about what we can actually get done. Jeff Speck says, pick the winners. So today in West Palm Beach, we're building more bike lanes and planning a connected bike network. We are narrowing traffic lanes. The words road diet are a regular part of our conversations. We embrace mass transit. And with our trolleys, trolleys are running on non-fossil fuel. And with the soon to open Brightline. We're very excited about Brightline opening. We have bike share program. We are planning for bus rapid transit and light rail. We're talking about alternative uses for our parking garages when autonomous cars become the norm. But all of this is not without its challenges. There are naysayers all around who continue to believe that people in South Florida will not get out of their cars, that people in South Florida will not walk, that people in South Florida will not bike, and that more and wider roads are the answer to every transportation change. I think they're wrong. And so we have our work cut out for us if we want to be a safer, greener, more walkable city. Working together, I believe that we can make it happen. You all are working in a field that is experiencing transformational change. Well, change is not always easy. It's always exciting. And I look forward to you. I look to you to help us move this people-centered agenda forward. Thank you for inviting me here today, and have a great morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And now I'd like to invite all of our panelists up. Grab one of these large blue chairs on the stage here. As they're coming up, I want to introduce the moderator, Dr. Kim Delaney. For the last 7 years, I've had the great privilege of serving on Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. For the last year, I've served as the chair of the council. And one of the things that I've observed over those 7 years is there's an extraordinary amount of talent on Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council through our leader, Michael Busha, and the great staff that we have there. We've reached out and helped communities throughout South Florida, not beyond the Treasure Coast even. So there's a lot of talent there. We're very fortunate today to have Dr. Delaney agreeing to moderate this panel to discuss density and mobility issues. Kim has a PhD in public administration. She has a bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Florida. We won't hold that against her. And Kim's expertise is really, she is a transportation planning expert. She's also economics expert as it relates to transportation planning and land use, and really a great resource, not only to Treasure Coast, but to our entire South Florida community. So with that, Kim, I'm going to have you come up and you can introduce your panel.
Well, thank you for the invitation and the kind words. This is a really a phenomenal opportunity to have this conversation about density and mobility. And usually with the Regional Planning Council, we're addressing this conversation in the planning conference, the ULI as well, in the Railvolution conference, kind of a more of an academic setting. And so one of the things that's really rewarding about this setting is it's a really private sector driven conversation, and that's really how we make things happen. If the engagement of the private sector and the investment community in these larger policy issues is what all the successful regions have as a hallmark for success. So So great compliments to WGI for arranging this, and thanks for the invitation. So I was asked to be very brief, which I'm not very good at, but I'll do my best. And so briefly, talking about density and mobility, the population of the state and of the region is growing, and so we're at about 20 million now in the state of Florida. We're going to be at maybe around 40 million by 2060, so we have a pretty big task at hand, which is how do we handle a doubling of the population, and do we do it in the same way that we have, with the good and bad that's come from that, or do we consider some different trends, which are kind of all around us, and we're starting to see them in Palm Beach County and in the region. So if we like those things, can we facilitate those trends? Just kind of zooming into the Southeast Florida region, right? Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach have been planning transportation and land use together through SEFTEC, the Southeast Florida Transportation Council. So these images are from their recent plan. Maybe about 5.6 million, just under 6 million in the 3 counties, growing to 7 million, although there are some numbers that suggest it could be greater than that as we go forward about the next 20 to 25 years. And so with that, we have an opportunity to kind of rethink, again, how we settle that chunk of folks that are coming in. This slide, which many of you probably are familiar with, just illustrates the transect. Okay, so if you think about the way land is settled across the horizon, to your right, in the natural condition, way out to the west, the lowest amount of density, the hardest to serve from a transit and infrastructure standpoint. As we start to increase densities across the spectrum, land use becomes much more efficient. So we don't have the luxury of the kinds of resources we've had over the last 50 years to just build roads where we want to, right? To build libraries and police and fire where we need them, or really where we want them. But being more efficient with that at least gives you a chance to think about those denser trends that we're seeing, especially in the coastal communities east of I-95. If we consider the transect and apply it to Palm Beach County, which will happen in a moment. Oh, there we go. So if we apply this, the transect to Palm Beach County, there we go. I'm seeing it on my side. What we see is an array of land uses that we have in our place, right? So we have some suburban stuff, some natural conditions, some suburban stuff kind of in the middle, and that can be arranged from a density standpoint in different ways, kind of a more efficient or perhaps less efficient pattern. And then as we get into urban centers, that's an Abacoa image on the bottom, and then West Palm on the top, a more dense condition that again creates different opportunities for land use experiences. One of the things we know in the region is that we have an evolving urban market, right? And this is something that we're not seeing just in Palm Beach County, we're seeing it across the state and across the nation. Who are the 2 big buyers that are coming in? The millennials, right, who want urban environments, and the empty nesters who want walkable communities. The adage that I like the best from my friend Marilee Utter, who runs ULI West, is the 5-minute walk to coffee is the key characteristic that makes for a successful project today and going forward. So there are other terms you can use. It might be a walk with a popsicle. Can you get home? It's kind of hard to apply that in Palm Beach County and Florida. But 5-minute walk with coffee, I think, is kind of more my speed. So if this is who we know is coming, the question is, where do they want to live, right? And so we have a lot of places that really fit those characteristics of what the millennials want and what the empty nesters want. And those are things that create active street life. They create walkable places. They create natural surveillance, right? Because there's a mix of uses. So there's an active 18-hour population. So there's already somebody out kind of walking their dog or getting a paper or getting a coffee or coming home. And so we don't have to police them as much because people are out on the streets around the clock. And so we know from a mobility standpoint, kind of original Florida mobility looks like this, right? And we're not there. Modernized mobility, right, as we started to modernize, looked kind of like this. And that led to some conditions that became a little overwhelming from a relationship between those dense urban places that we know people want and the kinds of land use conditions that result. In Palm Beach County, we have a particular challenge because when we developed, we didn't have a tight grid as we went to the west, let's say. So east of I-95, we have lots of roadway interconnections, but as we go west, there are fewer and fewer. And so what we know is the less connected the roadways are, the bigger the streets must be to handle those connections. And the more connected they are, the smaller the streets can be. That's math, it's not theory. in terms of accommodating traffic. And so mobility in the new millennium kind of looks like this, right? We have Palm Trans service that's carrying 1 million people a month. We have services like Brightline, a new introduction of private sector mass transit. Pretty remarkable that we have a station happening down the street for a precedential service in the United States. Tri-Rail, which is planned to, of course, extend onto the FEC corridor and create coastal link with stations up and down through Palm Beach County, and more urban conditions like the downtowns, which are starting to see trolley service, ped bike service, and other providers. We also have expanded private options today that we haven't had as we've been planning all this time, right? Because we were always figuring everyone is going to have at least 2 cars per household. And those cars have to be parked all the time in a space, 24 hours a day. And every time they moved the car, which was 12 times a day for the typical household, that car had to be parked in every location. So we spent a lot of money making sure the cars were really, really happy. The market has decided they don't really need to do that anymore because guess what? You can use your cell phone and you can get a ride in 5 minutes. And you don't have to park that car. So we don't have to spend $15,000 or $20,000 of space to put it in a 2,500 space parking garage. We can spend that $40 million and create a condition that is one perhaps that offers up different opportunities. We also have expanded mobility choices that we know we see, right? Skybike is here. Raphael had the statistics on Skybike ridership. I think if you take it as a percentage of, or something happened. Can you all hear me still? Okay, I'm not hearing myself, so I'll just presume that I have the mommy voice and I'm calling across the playground. So Skybike has 8,000 participants now. It's almost 10% of the city's population is now registered to use Skybike. That's remarkable. Electric vehicle charging stations, again, new modes that are coming on the horizon. Self-driving cars like this Google car that a UF grad just picked up apparently. So we have a different terrain and perhaps a way to rethink how we allocate both capital investment in terms of where we're storing the cars and the facilities that we use to accommodate them. Complete streets are a topic that I just can't leave alone because it's kind of the growing trend. I'm hoping it doesn't become a hackneyed phrase. There's so much conversation about complete streets at this point. In fact, it's now DOT's new priority, which is a phenomenal evolution for the department that used to be the Department of Roadway Building. And instead, DOT is advocating for complete streets, which are streets that kind of have all those components that, if you remember that slide about where the millennials and the empty nesters want to live, those are streets that accommodate all the different modes, right, in the new millennium. So they've got transit, they've got bike ped accommodations. They probably have smaller lanes because they're not really figuring everybody's in their suburban driving down the street every minute of the day. But maybe a little less of that space is allocated to vehicles and a little more to things like wider sidewalks and an opportunity to actually use the street as an outdoor room. There are ways to retrofit conditions. We have a lot of existing complete streets in Palm Beach County. And then as we look forward, there are some repair mechanisms, if you will. The mayor mentioned road diets. One of the ones the council was fortunate to work on recently in West Palm is Dixie Highway. So Dixie Highway, for example, is going through a process now where the city has decided, gosh, you know what, this really doesn't look like the best address. But if we do something a little different, that same road can have a very different look and feel, still provide the capacity it needs to move all the cars, but actually not presume everyone is driving, again, 12 trips a day, but maybe they're moving in different modes. Different sections of that corridor, again, being retrofitted, perhaps, in different manners that make them more complete, that better support density and mobility, if we think those things are valid trends, which the market seems to think they are, and we want to celebrate those. And so, here's my closing slide. I hope I'm fast enough, Michael. I only had one coffee when I came in. Here's what I know about the future. It happens as a result of what we do today. So we have choices to make. We have policy decisions to either support or redirect. And so with that, we have a panel this morning who I'm fortunate to say I have long-standing relationships with each of the panelists, and they are amazing professionals, each of them, in their capacities. Nick Uren is the fairly new executive director of the Palm Beach MPO. In working with MPOs across the state, what we would suggest at the Planning Council is the Palm Beach MPO is one of the most progressive MPOs in the state of Florida, and perhaps the leadership across the nation in the way it has reconsidered policy priorities for Palm Beach County, really extended decision-making to the local level, and enabled a process that allows local governments to advance those priorities for the MPO process. So Nick Uren, one of our first panelists, Ali Soul, another longtime friend, and luckily a big Gator fan as well, although we're still sad from the holiday weekend. So Ali is the marketing director for Brightline and has amazing knowledge about the region because her history includes certainly not just the Brightline project, but she was also one of the key staff members on the team to advance the Coastal Link project, which is Tri-Rail's extension on the FEC when it was called the South Florida East Coast Corridor Study. So she really knows the region really intimately throughout all the transportation networks and land use patterns that we have. Jack Lear, a third panelist for us, coming in from the private sector. Jack is a resident of Palm Beach County, and he's been with East Wind Development for almost a decade. And Jack has live projects underway in all of these different markets, in West Palm, in Boynton Beach, up in Jupiter, and has some unique perspective on what it takes to make things happen, what it takes to make projects happen that respond again to that market interest. And then finally, Rafael Clemente, an inspiration and an agent of change in West Palm Beach. I wish I had Rafael's training schedule. I would be in much better shape than I did. So Ralph is able to live the dream, living in downtown West Palm, and working as the executive director of the DDA, which is kind of in many ways the perfect example of living the urban dream, if you will. Living close enough to be able to skateboard, bike, or walk to work if you want to. And so Rafael is the executive director of the DDA. It, of course, has a very close relationship to the city of West Palm Beach. And so Rafael will have a chance to kind of represent that local government and agency perspective on these topics. And so with that, we'll move over to the panel. Questions for the panel are mine. Should I stay here for a minute? I'll stay here since I have a mic. So starting with Nick. A lead question for Nick. So there's a premise that promoting density and mobility are good things for the region, and they're good things for the county. What we know, looking at the data, is density and mobility do things like promote economic sustainability, reduce carbon emissions, create better quality of life, enhance economic sustainability. Those are the kinds of outcomes, at least that we see in the data. So if that premise is right, how does the MPO approach density and mobility in its planning and in its allocation of resources? And what kinds of priorities does the MPO have that advance those trends?
Kim, thanks for the question. Are these mics working okay? Yeah, it sounds like it's picking up now. Well, again, my name is Nick Uren. I'm here with, on behalf of the Palm Beach MPO and representing our 21 local elected officials who get to serve in directing the transportation resources, really the federal and state gas taxes, towards the transportation projects that our communities most desire, most want to see implemented to provide mobility for all of our residents, businesses, and visitors. With respect to mobility and density, I think what I want to say initially is that the MPO does not have any land use authority, so they can't direct the decisions that local governments make regarding zoning and land use on various private properties that come forward before them for development approvals. However, those decisions in large part dictate the options that we have in the public sector to provide transportation services and infrastructure to serve those developments. And density creates more options. I think density is, higher densities are easier to serve. If people start near one another and they finish near one another, it's easier to convince them to join together in a trip, whether it's a public transit trip or a private service trip. Even a trip like an Uber pool can be an option available to people who start and end their overall journey in a relative proximity to one another. So density gives us those options. It also creates an opportunity for us to invest in walkable, bikeable communities, because those short trips that people need to take to get together with one another so that they can take a longer trip on public transit service are now a critical component of our infrastructure. We have to provide those trips if we want to see people begin to take advantage of the investments in public transit service that we plan to be making over the next 5, 10, and 15 years. And just on that point, I want to mention, in Palm Beach County, we are surrounded by opportunities. We have a wonderful climate that allows us to travel outdoors year-round. Sometimes it may feel a little uncomfortable, but 6 months of the year, the heat index for Palm Beach County is actually between 75 and 85 degrees, which means the feels like temperature puts us in that category on a global scale that most people would call tropical paradise. For half the year, it is a paradise to walk, bike, and move around Palm Beach County. And we have a tremendous opportunity to make mobility investments in Palm Beach County because we have 821 miles of roadway on our major road network that is missing a sidewalk on one or the other side of the road. That's a tremendous opportunity to make an investment in minimal safety infrastructure for pedestrians walking to school, to their businesses, to their coffee shops. We're missing bicycle facilities, just a minimal bicycle facility on 676 miles of our major road network. Not going all the way to the point of saying, let's create a safe facility for all users of all ages and abilities. I know the mayor mentioned that she had the opportunity to travel to Copenhagen a year ago. I actually had a chance with the assistant city administrator to travel there in September on a year two, sort of a follow-up grant opportunity through the Knight Foundation. And one of the partners of that trip was an organization called 880 Cities. And the premise of that organization is that if you design the infrastructure of your city so that an 8-year-old can navigate it comfortably, safely, and alone, and an 80-year-old can navigate it comfortably, safely, and alone, then you have designed your city so that it works with every component of your population. I would submit to you that Palm Beach County is not there today, but we have the opportunity of creating that kind of investment, that kind of infrastructure, so that an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old can reasonably walk, bike, or take the transit system to their destination. They are not dependent on an automobile to get them from point A to point B. And the last point I'll make on mobility and infrastructure is that we have over 100 bus stops today that have over 500 people using them on a monthly basis and have no form of transit amenities, no shelter, no bus bench, just a sign in the ground that says the bus is going to come here. We have a lot of people using the system, but we haven't invested in the infrastructure that makes that system convenient and attractive to maybe bring some of those choice riders on board and create that expectation from our private sector, from our citizens, that the public sector is going to provide a service worth using. So density certainly lends itself to this discussion. It gives us the mobility options, the options to provide mobility in various forms, and the Palm Beach MPO has certainly envisioned creation of that safe, efficient, connected network of transportation facilities and services that will meet those demands.
Thanks. Tropical paradise. I love that. So if there's a marketing angle for using our streets in a different way, I think that's probably the best one that we did. So, Allie. So Allboard Florida is introducing a unique transportation system in the nation, and we are fortunate to have one of those stations in downtown West Palm. And one of the unique things about introducing that system is that it complements all these other pieces of the transportation network, right? Because the train station is typically not your destination, right? Something you take the train to the train station, and then your destination is somewhere else. So there's a last mile connection, sometimes a couple mile connection, to get to actually your point of destination. So with that, how can a service like Allboard Florida complement the transportation network that Nick described? And what are the things that can be done to enhance and encourage the development trends that are happening around those stations and throughout the region?
Thank you, Kim. I'd also like to start by thanking the Watman Group for hosting this, to Mayor Moyo and the entire City Commission for supporting Brightline as we've been working through our partnership with the city, Mayor Burdick and her colleagues on the County Commission for their support as well, and for the two gentlemen to my left and right, Raphael and Nick, for their support. We've been able to accomplish a lot in the 4 years that Allboard Florida, which is now Brightline, has been announced. So Brightline is, as Kim mentioned, the nation's first intercity express privately funded passenger train. We are set to open between Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach in mid-2017. And what we're really seeing with the introduction and the announcement of our service is a change in the downtowns where we've selected to have our stations. So in building Allboard Florida Brightline, we wanted to be located in areas that had existing transportation systems and the transportation systems that were going to come online soon. So So starting in West Palm Beach, we're working with our partners at the Trolley, with Palm Tran, with the Bike Share, and then with Lyft and Uber to connect our station to where people want to go. Excuse me, in Fort Lauderdale, we will connect to the Future Wave streetcar, which will connect to Las Olas Boulevard, the Arts District, and then really in downtown Miami is where we're having our major transportation hub. We will connect with 4 different rail systems: Metro Rail, which will take you directly to the airport and to Coral Gables and to Dayland; Metro Mover, which is an elevated system that will connect you to the Performing Arts Center, the Brickwork District, and then the new Perez Art Museum and the Science Center, which are coming online shortly. And then also the bus system and the City of Miami trolley system. And all of this is important because to the development side, Brightline is also developing about 4 million square feet of real estate around each of our stations. And that's just Brightline's investment. And the City of West Palm Beach, you have buildings going up directly across the street from our station. We are investing more in West Palm Beach. We have a 290-story apartment tower that's currently under construction. We own about 9 acres in Fort Lauderdale around our station that we will be developing, and then 3 million square feet in downtown Miami. In downtown Miami, we're already starting to see office buildings and tenants locating their headquarters or their businesses close to our station. The Miami Foundation moved right across the street from us and announced that our train station and our mobility hub was one of the primary reasons for selecting that spot. We have another developer in downtown Miami who is developing micro units, and also an apartment building without parking spaces, because that building is in close proximity to our station. Because young professionals who are moving to the city centers are really looking to be connected to areas where they can have multiple forms of transportation. And we really feel that Brightline is a new transportation spine for Southeast Florida and will eventually be for the entire state.
Remarkable. So, thank you. And the station is open for tours.
You can see me after if you'd like
Okay,
a tour.
so see how the tours afterwards. So I think we still tour our event. So Raphael. So Raphael it has a perspective that is really very interesting because it's local government and it's public agency, which is really almost like a public-private agency. So kind of really bridging the gap between those two worlds. So the DDA and local governments really set the stage for investment, right? They make those policy decisions and they set up a regulatory condition that promotes a certain type of development. And the DDA is often looked at really as an agent of change in West Palm and really across the region. And so with that, what are the types of actions that are taking place in West Palm and in other communities as well? If you want to talk to those. But West Palm, of course, is the main part of the wheelhouse. So what are the types of actions that are taking place that are facilitating the investment that's consistent with the city's long-term goals? And what's working well, and what are maybe things that perhaps could be tweaked?
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks, Michael, to the team and Team One for hosting this. What a great opportunity. I'm just curious, how many people in the room are PEs? How many people are engineers? Are engineers, right? Because I think that as we go forward in this conversation, I think you should think of yourselves as the heroes of the future. Because in designing these systems, you're the ones that are going to be able to really do that. So the Downtown Development Authority, and thankfully we have leadership in the city, mayor first and foremost, that really gets it, as we heard, and who has enabled the DDA to play a role in being that agent of change, not only by giving us the ability to have a voice in the conversation about how West Palm Beach grows, but to give us opportunities to go out and make those changes. So in downtown, for many reasons, and Kim, I've heard you use this term, your feedback. Is that better? I've heard you use this term, I've heard the phrase that West Palm Beach is situated or positioned perhaps better than anywhere in the region for multimodal transportation, in very large part to Brightline, all aboard Florida, Tri-Rail, Palm Tran, or trolley system. The land use policies and the planning decisions that have been made over the past 20 or 25 years in our downtown area, projects like the Dixie Highway Corridor are all lining up to facilitate exactly what we're talking about today, density and mobility. So with that framework in place, what we've been advocating for are system upgrades. Bike share, the trolley's been in place for 16 years now, carries roughly 500,000 people, 500,000 riders a year in downtown. And for a small place, that's very high ridership. It's going to explode, I think, when Brightline comes online. What we can build and where we can build it. West Palm Beach is the densest place in Palm Beach County, and we have a completely mixed-use place. So what we've been able to see here in the downtown area is the validation of all of these ideas or theories, and we've been measuring that along with the city as closely as we can. 30% of people surveyed in our downtown area recently at various times of the day, various different places, said that they got there where they were going without a car. They walked, biked, Uber, Lyft, train, skateboard. We also have seen a shift in how people are deciding to get to downtown, not just within the downtown. And the products that are coming, as you said, 290 unit project. We have, I don't know how many thousands of units coming online or soon to be coming online in the near future. What we've been trying to do is measure all that and then give the information to decision makers, give that data to allow them to make the policy shifts. And part of this question was, how do we, what policy shifts are necessary to keep going? I think the bedrock of all of it, the demand is here, the shifts in behavior are here, a tectonic shift in under Mayor Moyo's leadership and how the city approaches public space and transportation policy is here, but there are some broader perspective policies like impact fees that only fund roadway expansions, which are, I think, a penalty on density. And I'll give an example of a restaurant that's coming into the north end of our downtown on 6th Street. You may have read about this in the Palm Beach Post. A 4,000 square foot restaurant it's an adaptive reuse from a warehouse, previously warehouse, Dr. Pepper bottling company from 1920 something. Developer bought it for about $200,000 or $250,000. When he went through the permitting process, county traffic demanded a $146,000 roadway impact fee on a $200,000 purchase. That would have killed the project. The DDA, the city, we all came to the aid of this project, and by presenting a lot of data, helped him reduce that fee significantly. The challenge with that is that any of that money, whatever money was paid, I think he paid roughly $30,000 in impact fees. Any of that money that would have been spent could not be spent on these improvements that would be sidewalks, bike lanes, transit stops, anything that would benefit that project or anything near it. Hopefully we're not going to expand any roads, probably east of I-95 anytime soon. So I think that first and foremost, changing policies to allow us to invest in system improvements that are multimodal and thinking beyond 10-lane roads and thinking about building a multimodal system. As the mayor pointed out, we learned a lot when we took that trip to Copenhagen, recently to Denver, which I think Nick was there with us, the mayor, some others in the room were there. Denver, I don't think, is a lot different from this region. It's a much bigger city, but regionally, probably not too different from us. Sprawl, pretty flat, water issues. They have invested tremendous amounts of money in multimodal systems, are allowing density to happen in the right places, in the right way, and they've seen an incredible boom. At the end of the day, it's transit and mobility are economic development tools. That's exactly how they work. And I think that as a region, as a county, we need to really refocus focus on how we're making those investments. Did I hit that?
Jack. So Jack is able to give a true private sector perspective with Eastman Development. And so from the private perspective, the regulatory environment can either facilitate the things that we say that we want or create conflicts and get in the way of getting the things that we say that we want. And so what kind of market trends are you seeing in Palm Beach County? And what are the things that can be done to really facilitate capital investment in those trends?
Okay, thanks, Skip. Thanks also to the Watman Group for the invitation and hosting the event. A bit of background, we're a regional developer. We focus on multifamily rental housing. We work primarily in South Florida and Central Florida. Among the recent projects that we've done in Palm Beach County are Bernie Place in downtown West Palm Beach, Dakota at Abacoa, and we're just finishing up High Ridge Landing in Boynton Beach with Vertex Construction. Among the trends we're seeing now, we're really entering year 7 of this real estate cycle, this revival. So we're seeing rising land costs, unsurprisingly. We're seeing higher construction costs, and that construction cost issue becomes a harder challenge as you increase the density. Mid-rises cost more than gardens, and high-rises cost more than mid-rises. So that puts more pressure, basically, to have higher rents in order to make the numbers work. The other thing we're seeing is a financing trend in which construction lenders have pulled back, not by cutting off credit, but reducing the amount of debt that they're prepared to lend on projects. So that means that you have less debt and then more equity, which is more expensive. Again, putting more pressure on the bottom line. A couple larger trends. We're seeing more household formations now due to demographic factors. We're seeing a lower rate of single-family home ownership. It peaked at about 2007 at 69%. It's down to about 63%. So correspondingly more rentals. And then incomes have really not progressed that greatly. Some would say that they're stagnant. So what that's resulted in is a tremendous need for what I would term workforce housing, which is housing for those between 80% and 120% of area median income. So in Palm Beach County, the AMI for a household of 4 is about 64,000. So that means you're talking about groups in the 45 to 90,000. Could be 1, could be 2, could be young families. So, and the premise behind workforce housing is it's better for people to live near where they work, where they go to school, where they shop, where they recreate, than it is to have them commuting down from St. Lucie County and clogging up the roads. So, so that's one of the niches that we've identified and that we've tried to address in our development going forward. So, Kim mentioned regulatory factors and the role that local government can play, and it's a large one. One of the things to note is when we look at a development budget for a particular project, after land, after construction costs, the largest factor in there is this constellation of government fees, building permit fees, impact fees, utility connection fees, traffic contributions, other fees, and in some ways, affordable housing fees if there's a mandate to either contribute to a fund or do workforce or affordable housing. So in Palm Beach County, there have basically been 2 approaches that have been adopted. One is we'll call the mandate approach, which is if you develop a particular residential project, you have to include a certain number of workforce housing units that either rent or sell for a lower price. And the premise behind that is there's enough meat on the bone, there's enough profit that you can basically absorb the hit of having some lower units, lower price units. The other is really an incentive structure. And this, West Palm Beach has recently adopted an incentive program, but there are a number of ways that you can come at it. When you look at land, obviously land cost is what it is, but density bonuses mean that you get more units on a given amount of land, which means that you lower the cost per unit per land. Obviously, if a county or municipality can sell land, surplus land, that helps too. From a construction standpoint, and this is where the density and mobility theme comes in, while your construction costs are fixed, the type of parking and the amount of parking you provide is a key variable. I mentioned before that mid-rises and high-rises cost more. Developments with parking structures cost more than those that don't. So to the extent that you're building a smaller parking structure or you do not have to build a parking structure, that makes a huge impact on getting your numbers to work. Green Street Advisors, which is a real estate advisory firm in California, estimates that with the rise of driverless cars and also Uber and Lyft and other car sharing services, that the amount of parking will be cut in half in multifamily developments by 2030. And there's also design implications from that. You need to have areas that are drop-off points where you can get a ride share pickup where it's sheltered, etc. So parking is a key variable in getting workforce housing to work. In terms of fees, building permit fees, to the extent that there are breaks there. In Palm Beach County, we don't do impact fee waivers, we do impact fee credits. The county has a program where interest on impact fee payments is used to pay impact fees for projects with qualifying workforce housing. The problem there has been interest earnings have not been great in this low interest environment, but the program has definite potential for the future. Waivers and utility connection fees and other fees, art fees, traffic contribution fees. I mean, these are keys to making the numbers work. A couple other things would be property tax relief if there's a lower income, and then also the incentives overall. So one other thing I wanted to mention is that Palm Beach County is working on a revision to its workforce housing ordinance. And right now, the way that you satisfy the workforce housing ordinance as a developer would be you either build the units on site, you build the units off site, you pay into a county fund. And what they're looking at is another alternative. And I'm on the board of the Housing Leadership Council, which helps to promote workforce housing in the county, in which they would serve as sort of a matchmaker between developers who need to pay into the to build workforce housing and then developers who are seeking to build it. And what it would be a direct payment from one to the other in order to help basically pay the cost, cut out the middleman, as you were. And so that's a program that the county is looking at. They haven't adopted yet, but they're looking at it pretty seriously. And then the last thing I would say would be that the real emerging trend in development is to build in TOD areas near mass oriented transit. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. The development we're doing in Boynton Beach, there was actually a parking reduction because we're in close proximity to the tri-rail station there. So, there are a lot of tools in the kit, and local government's a big player in helping private developers like us make it work.
And I'm glad to know the code in Boynton Beach is working for youth parking.
Well, the city wrote that code when the stations came about, so that's the first endorsement I've heard of it directly. So questions from, wow, that is loud to me. Is it loud to you? Holy God, I don't know where to stand with that. So with that, are there questions? Whoops, that's not the slide I want. There we go. Are there questions from the audience? Jeff?
Right now, there's a, and it's been in existence for several years, there's a dedicated palm trend route from Wellington, which is downtown, terminal. May I get the ridership on that? I know it's been around a long time.
Wow, that's a very detailed question. I'm going to look
I mean,
over.
just generally.
And Nick, since you have the mic, can you repeat the question? Because I
Sure.
missed the chance to do
The question is dedicated, the Palm Trend has a dedicated route from Wellington to West Palm. What is the ridership on that particular route? I would actually mention two things to you. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I don't know, Steve, if you have a number. Okay. 15,000 per month? Yeah, 15,000 monthly. So I I would mention there are two routes that serve from Wellington to West Palm. There's Route 43, which is the more locally oriented service. It stops 35 times-ish between the Wellington Mall, running up State Road 7, east on Southern Boulevard, up to North Farms, east on Okeechobee, on its way to the downtown and the Intermodal Center. And then Route 40, which actually originates in the Glades area, in the western communities, stops at the Wellington Mall, and then is a limited stop service that goes directly to the downtown Intermodal Center. I think one of the challenges is frequency of service and frankly publicity. It's making people aware that the opportunity exists to travel from our middle communities to the downtown in a relatively limited stop environment in a time frame that is competitive to driving alone. So we need to do a better job of educating our public that those options exist today. The other thing I want to mention is we talk about in the MPO investing in a safe, efficient, connected multimodal transportation system. One of the things that we're doing to make those transit system routes more efficient is investing in what's called transit signal prioritization. That's a fancy term to say when the bus is coming up to a traffic light and it's full of people, we want the traffic light to either stay green a little longer so the bus gets through, or if the light is red, we want it to get back to green to get that bus through a little more quickly. That is it's an interesting discussion to have in Palm Beach County, where we have historically been an auto-oriented focus on the transportation system, because when you're taking the light back to green for a bus, the effect of that change is that you're making the light green for a shorter amount of time for the cars on the side street that might have been waiting their turn. What we're seeing is an evolving conversation of priorities. How much of an investment in priority do we want to make in our vulnerable users, in our bicyclists, in our pedestrians, in our transit users who are also pedestrians? Are we willing to locate things like transit stops near intersections so that even though the bus, when it stopped, might have an effect of delaying the cars behind it, it's dropping off and picking up passengers at a point where they're encouraged to cross the major road network safely at a signalized intersection. The alternative is we put the bus stop in the middle of the block so that the cars have an opportunity to get around it and they're not as delayed by the bus. And then the people who are dropped off and picked up by that bus are encouraged to jaywalk in the middle of the block, kind of dart across the road, because they don't want to walk the 500 to 1,000 feet down the road to the nearest traffic signal so that they can cross with the protection of the traffic signal. Long answer to your question, I think what we're seeing is it's not a well-utilized service today, but I'm not sure that's because it's not a needed service. I think it may be because we haven't gone far enough in investing to make it a convenient, attractive alternative to driving alone.
Other folks want to talk to Palmtree? No? Okay, other questions? Yes, sir.
Just follow on that thing. I'm one of, I don't need this kid, but I lived in Wellington for 26, 27 years, and I worked downtown West Palm Beach that entire time. And I've taken the bus to that very region for the Palm Beach community. So what I'm hearing lately is some grumbling about possibly light rail coming to the east and west. Anybody on that?
Sure. Let me take that one too. So, here's the two pieces of information as a background to the final point I want to make sure this group is aware of. First, we are projecting, based on the land use and development activities that we've seen in the future development activity associated with Central Palm Beach County, predominantly residential projects that have been recently entitled Westlake, Avenir, and then the Indian Trail project along Seminole Pratt Whitney. We're projecting a demand for roughly 200,000 car trips from Seminole Pratt-ish, maybe State Road 7 to I-95 on the combination of Okeechobee Boulevard, Bellevue Road, and Southern Boulevard. 200,000 people at least, because you've got 1.2, 1.3 people per car, give or take. So maybe 230, 260,000 people want to go east-west every day in the central part of Palm Beach. That's fact number one. Fact number two is that DOT has established what they call their strategic intermodal system, and that is their major roadway network for conveying people and goods throughout the state. In Palm Beach County, the major facilities on the strategic intermodal system are I-95, the Turnpike, US 27 in the western part of Palm Beach County that serves to connect Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach and our Lake Okeechobee western communities, and Southern Boulevard and Beeline Highway. Those are our 5 major strategic intermodal system roadways. Here's what happens within the state because of the funding policies that have been enacted by the DOT. The state looks at each one of those corridors in a rotation and says, what do we need to build next on the corridor whose turn it is to make sure we have a lot of mobility, a lot of capacity for vehicles and goods moving on those corridors. 10 years ago, the state did State Road 710, and they said, we've got to widen it out west in the northwest part of Palm Beach County, all the way into Martin County. We're going to take it from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road, under construction today. We need to widen it from North Lake Boulevard to Blue Heron, from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. They're going to be spending $100 million to widen that section of Beeline Highway in the next 5 years. And we need to make it a continuous 4-lane road from Blue Heron Boulevard into the Port of Palm Beach. So we're going to spend several $100 million buying homes and then constructing a roadway project in order to make that continuous connection from the Port of Palm Beach all the way. You get the picture. Here, the next thing they did was I-95. They looked at the corridor of I-95 and they said, all right, we need to make a wider interstate in southern Palm Beach County. So we're going to spend $150 million to introduce what are called managed lanes on I-95 in southern Palm Beach County from Linton Boulevard down into Broward County. You've seen them in Miami-Dade, now they come all the way up to central Broward County. They're the internal lanes that you get to pay a variable price to drive in based on the congestion of the general purpose lanes adjacent to them. That concept is going to move north into Palm Beach County. You're going to have now the opportunity, instead of using the inside lane as an HOV lane, you're going to have an opportunity to pay to drive in that lane. It'll be separated with those flexible delineator posts. The new and improved ones, not the old ones that everybody drove through. The other thing the DOT did was they looked at each of the interchanges and they said, how can we make it easier to get on and off of I-95 throughout Palm Beach County? They identified turn lane improvements and sometimes overpass improvements at each of the interchanges. Southern Boulevard is an example of that, where they want to make a significant investment in making it easier to get on and off that corridor by car. They're going to be spending $700 to $800 million on the I-95 corridor over the next 5 to 10 years to make it easier to get on and off and to be able to drive within those express lanes so that they can provide north-south mobility. All that is background to say right now the department is looking at Southern Boulevard and they're trying to decide what should be the investment in east-west mobility throughout Palm Beach County, from all the way out of US 27 in the Glades communities, in the western communities to I-95 in the east. Should it be an additional investment in roadway capacity, potentially becoming more like an I-595 corridor that we see in Broward County, even with the reversible lanes that Broward has identified and constructed now on the 595 corridor? Or, and I think what we're hearing from our elected officials and a lot of our community representatives is, should we invest in an alternative mode of transportation to allow for the types of sort of game-changing development patterns that we're talking about this morning to occur in Palm Beach County? The multimodal infrastructure that maybe a light rail system would allow to occur along that corridor, and so that we could serve communities like Wellington and Royal Palm, like the Arden property, like the Glades communities, and all the way into West Palm and into the downtown area. So that decision is being kicked around right now. I'll tell you, the DOT's focus has been on reversible lanes and providing an easier way to drive east-west, east in the morning, west in the afternoon for cars on Southern Boulevard. What I really resonated with when Kim was doing her presentation in the beginning was the private sector needs to own the vision for our community. So the question I have for you is, do you like the idea of investing major capital dollars in a road-based outcome? Or do you want us to push the envelope? Do you want your elected officials to push the envelope? Do you want us to push the envelope in Tallahassee, even on funding decisions, to say, let's not make an auto-oriented decision on that corridor, let's make a transit-oriented decision and the supporting land use decisions at the local level that we need to complement that service, and the investment in bicycle pedestrian infrastructure around where the stations will be that we need to make to complement that service so that we can create a different type of transportation outcome for Palm Beach County. That's a question I want you to really wrestle with and then talk to your local elected officials. Again, I represent the 21 elected officials who sit on the Palm Beach MPO governing board. There are 5 county commissioners. I have 15 municipal elected officials, 1 each from our 13 largest municipalities, and then 2 from West Palm and 2 from Boca Raton, and 1 Port of Palm Beach representative. Those are your voice in that DOT decision about whether this should be an auto-oriented outcome or whether we should invest in a different way of doing business in Palm Beach County. So this is the window of opportunity. That's your homework assignment. Get involved and help us make sure that the decisions made by the department and endorsed by the MPO board are the right decisions for the future of Palm Beach County.
Inspirational. That's why we're having this conversation.
I just want to just put a little tiny bit on top of that incredible answer. I think we can look at other places, and I use Denver as an example for our region, and we can use our neighbors to the south, or Houston, or Southern California as maybe the opposite of what Denver has done, and sort of ask who do we want to be when we grow up. And having seen both of those models, I think that the easy answer is to embrace the build it and they will come concept for good options. Because every place that has done it and designed it properly and planned it out has seen the shift in use. So as single occupant vehicle travel becomes more expensive, more inconvenient, more painful, more miserable, people will gravitate toward those other options. And I would bet, Al, that you would, if the system was in place and it worked well, you would use it versus spend 40 minutes in your car.
Yeah?
And if I may actually add a real life example to what you said about pushing the envelope. So in Miami-Dade County, we have been working with SFRTA in the county and the city on Kim mentioned Tri-Rail Coastal Link, connecting the existing Tri-Rail system to downtown Miami. In Miami, our system is elevated 50 feet. So once we build that structure, it can't be changed. And if it could be changed, it would probably be cost prohibitive to the public sector. So 7 local agencies in Miami-Dade County took a leap, a very strong leap, and are funding the money needed to connect the existing Tri-Rail system to our downtown station, which is a huge benefit to not only Miami-Dade County, but to Broward and to Palm Beach as well. That means someone in Boca Raton, in Delray, in Boynton Beach can take a 1-seat ride to downtown, and someone in downtown Miami can take a 1-seat ride to Boca and to Delray and to Hallandale or Hollywood in Broward County. And so what this is really doing is helping to advance the discussion in Miami-Dade County on, now that Tri-Rail is connected to downtown, how does that system connect north on the existing FEC line and connect communities such as Midtown, North Miami Beach, Aventura. And a local Miami paper, Miami Today, reported today that earlier this week, 2 MPO board meetings had a sunshine meeting to discuss TIF funding on the FEC corridor to help pay for the advancement of that system. So to Nick's point, it really is the private sector pushing the public sector to make these changes and to step up to the plate to provide this service that's really needed for everyone.
Jack, to kind of redirect this discussion to you so you're not on the end down there, left alone. So if transportation investments are the cornerstone for leveraging capital investment, with the systems that, the kind of system that Nick's mentioned, is that a motivator for the private sector? How does the private sector respond when that kind of thing starts to get into conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, what it does is it creates a critical mass and then a market demand. I mean, you've already seen with both millennials and empty nesters, as you pointed out in your presentation, this gravitation to more urban areas. And West Palm is not that urbanized by the standard of what would they call core markets like San Francisco, Boston, New York, and others. But it's starting to hit with this recent downtown development, critical mass in terms of having enough people there where you support business, it becomes a virtuous cycle. So as a company, we're keenly interested in investing in TODs, and in fact, we are undertaking a development in the Orlando area that is near a Sunrail station as part of the expansion up there. So, so it's a strong incentive.
Super. So, Mayor, I think you had a comment, because I'm out of question time, unfortunately, but I think we can stay later. I don't know, it's up to Michael.
I was sitting here really wanting
been given permission for one more question. It has to be really, really good. Okay, does anybody have a 20? No? I guess Jeff's had his hand up. He's out of, the blood circulation is done in his hand. It's been up so long.
So we've got a tale of two cities. We have 16,000 in the Southwest, $260 billion of funded infrastructure out in the middle of nowhere. We have all these coastal cities trying to rebuild and no funding sources because the impact fees goes to the road. Okay. Tri-Rail has to come up with its own funding. City Link has to come up with its own funding. Okay. The bus systems have to come up with their own funding. How do you take a look at the infrastructure to rebuild the complete cities in the eastern part of the county with some kind of a fee, and then how do you pay for the mass transit infrastructure you want, which is going to be regional, county, and city level?
Okay, so for the folks that couldn't hear, financing the system, big capital cost and a larger O&M cost going forward. So those are two pieces of the equation that have to be balanced. So financing, right?
Well, the impact fee thing is, in my opinion, one of the most important conversations that we need to have in Palm Beach County right now. And just to give an example, Jeff, the trolley system that operates in downtown carries somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 people a year, has been consistently growing, but started out very strong in 2000, probably about 300,000 riders a year. We're above 500,000 now. We and the city fund that together. We're at roughly $1 per trip, and that's to move people through our district. I don't know. I know that it's about $3.6 million to build one lane mile. So I'd love to understand, maybe like from a cost-benefit perspective, if we have in our urban place a $1 per trip public expense to move people, like how does that translate into infrastructure and O&M when you have the right density and the right system in place? Just sort of to maybe inform that question a little bit more, and I'll turn it over to my more informed fellows.
So I think it's a great question. The challenge initially, I agree with Raphael, that there's a conversation that needs to happen with respect to the impact fees becoming mobility fees, and can we broaden the usage to accomplish a more multimodal outcome, more multimodal investment in infrastructure to serve the kind of trips that people want to take in our eastern coastal communities. The bigger question, if we develop a vision for a mass transit, a connected mass transit system, how do we pay for it? I think that question is maybe slightly premature, because the real challenge for us right now is to develop that vision of a connected mass transit system that we can then turn and endorse within our local circles, and then begin to sell to our broader circle, to the constituent base of Palm Beach County, to say, if you want this outcome, we need your contribution, we need your participation, whether that comes in the form of some sort of an additional surtax that we would have a discussion of down the line, or whether it comes in the form of a TIF-funded infrastructure commitment. We need the vision first before we solve the problem of how do we pay for it. And just so that the group knows, and I know we're running out of time, I'm going to do this very brief kind of overview of infrastructure with respect to roads and transit. When you think of a road project, you need to think in terms of a two-party commitment. There's a facility owner that the public sector usually is the committing entity. They say, okay, we're going to build this road, we're going to operate this road, we're going to maintain this road. And then the other party that's somewhat hidden from the conversation but needs to be acknowledged in this discussion is the individual who chooses to purchase, finance, operate, insure, maintain their vehicle to use that system. So you've got a public component of the cost of a road, and you've got a private component to the cost of a road. What we need to be aware of is that the transit services that we're all talking about have that same dichotomy. They have a public component to purchase, to construct the infrastructure for the vehicles to ride on, but then the other component, the purchase of the vehicles, the operating of the vehicles, the insurance of the vehicles, and even the payment of the drivers, all becomes a shared public commitment. And so when people say, well, gosh, the public transit system, it costs so much money, and they're going to make me pay for it even if I'm not a user of it. Well, frankly, you're paying through your gas taxes, you are paying to subsidize the road system that we've provided throughout Palm Beach County already. You're just not as aware of that contribution because we've hidden it in the gas tax, and you don't realize that 55 cents of every gallon you purchase goes towards government, not towards the price of fuel, because that's the component of tax that we've buried into the system. What I want you to understand is we need public and private participation if we want to move in a direction that involves mass transit, because that funding commitment is key to being able to provide a system that we would all like to see in Palm Beach County.
Michael?
Thank you, Kim, and all our panelists. We appreciate it. Good job. I hope you guys will just stay in your seats for a few minutes. I know there's some more questions out there, and we're finished with the drawing. Come up and maybe spend a few minutes with the panelists and